You are the only one who could do this, not because you're perfect, not because you're lucky, but because you're the one who's been scarred, twisted, sharpened by everything you've survived. Others wouldn't last a second in your place. They'd break, they'd run, they'd beg for mercy. But you were forged in the kind of fire that doesn't let people walk out the same. That's why it had to be you. Destiny doesn't pick the strongest or the smartest. It picks the one mad enough to keep standing when everyone else has fallen. Survival shaped you into the only fit candidate. Think about it. Life doesn't handpick winners from the comfortable, the sheltered, the ones who've had everything lined up neatly for them. No, it chooses the ones who've been dragged through the mud, the ones who've been laughed at, broken down, forgotten, left bleeding on the floor, and somehow still managed to crawl forward. Survival isn't pretty. It's not glamorous. It's not the heroic image people like to pretend it is. It's ugly. It's dirty. It's painful. And yet, it's the only thing that makes you capable of standing where others collapse. You didn't learn strength from books. You didn't learn resilience from speeches. You learned it from nights when no one came to help, when the walls closed in, when you had no choice but to claw your way out of your own darkness. That's where you were shaped. While others were given comfort, you were given chaos. While others had hands to catch them, you had only the ground waiting to break your fall. And instead of staying broken, you collected the pieces and turned them into armor. That's why you're different. Not because you wanted to be, but because you had to be. Pain was your teacher. Struggle was your companion. And survival was your only option. Others would crumble under what you've endured. They'd complain, they'd collapse. They'd beg for someone to take the weight off their shoulders. But you didn't wait for anyone, did you? You carried it, you dragged it, you bled under it, and somehow in the process, you became the only one strong enough to do what others cannot. People love to talk about talent, intelligence, privilege. Those shiny little decorations that look impressive from the outside. But when the storm comes, when everything is stripped away, those things don't matter. The only thing that matters is whether you can endure, whether you can take the hit and keep moving, whether you can keep breathing when it feels like the world is suffocating you. That's survival. And it's a test most people fail before they even realize they're being tested. But not you. You didn't just survive, you adapted. You grew sharper. You grew colder where you needed to, tougher where it mattered. Life sculpted you with its roughest hands, carved you into something raw and unbreakable. It's not pretty. No. It's jagged, scarred, uncomfortable. But that's what makes it real. That's what makes it powerful. Because the world doesn't need pretty masks. It needs someone who knows what it's like to live without one. And here's the truth. Survival isn't fair. It doesn't crown everyone who suffers. Plenty of people fall and never get back up. But you did. You kept moving long after you should have stopped. That's why you stand here as the only fit candidate. Not because the path was easier for you, but because it was harder. Because life pressed you harder, burned you hotter, tested you longer, and instead of breaking you, it revealed you. So when someone says, "You're the only one who could do this," don't mistake it for flattery. It's not a compliment. It's a fact. Because the brutal, merciless truth is this: no one else was built for it. They weren't carved by the same suffering. They weren't sharpened by the same storms. They weren't forced to become something more than human just to survive another day. But you were, and that survival is exactly what made you the only one capable of carrying the weight, the only one fit to stand in the fire without turning to ash. Others would collapse under the same weight. You know it, deep down. People like to pretend they could handle what you've handled, that if life threw its worst at them, they'd stand tall, grin, and march through the fire. But that's a lie they tell themselves, a comforting fantasy to help them sleep at night. The truth: most people would fold. They'd fall to their knees the moment the pressure crushed down, the moment the walls started caving in. They'd scream for help. They'd cry about how unfair it all is. And then they'd break into pieces too small to ever put back together. That's what happens when weight meets the weak. You carried burdens that were never meant for one person. You've held responsibilities, pain's silence, and scars that would have snapped the spine of anyone else. But you didn't snap. You bent, you twisted, sure. You suffered, but you didn't collapse. That's what separates you from the rest. Not the absence of pain, but your ability to take it, to absorb it, to walk with it pressing down on your shoulders, without letting it bury you alive. You ever watch people panic under pressure? Their voices crack, their movements scatter, their minds scramble for excuses and escapes. They lose themselves the moment the weight of reality presses too hard. That's the average person. They don't have the stomach for true weight. They don't have the patience to carry it day after day, year after year, without relief. But you, somehow you managed. You didn't run. You didn't beg for rescue. You didn't curl into a corner waiting for mercy. You took it all. And that's why you're here. That's why you're the only one who can do this. It's easy to admire strength from the outside, to clap for the survivor, to whisper about how inspiring it all is. But those same people applauding would have disintegrated if they had to feel even half of what you've carried. They don't understand the weight, not truly. They only see the outcome, not the crushing nights, not the moments where your bones screamed under invisible loads, not the loneliness that came with carrying things no one else could understand. They see the shine, not the scars. They clap for the strength, but they don't realize what it cost. And that's why the weight is proof. Proof that you're not like them. Proof that destiny didn't place its bet on the crowd. It placed it on you, because only you survived the test. Others would have collapsed long before now, under far lighter burdens. They would have shattered under things you've learned to treat as normal. That's the madness of it, isn't it? What crushed them, you carried. What destroyed them, you adapted to. And while they gave up, while they hid, while they cursed the world, you kept walking with the weight strapped to your back, step after brutal step. And people will never admit it out loud, but deep inside, they know the truth. They know they couldn't last a day in your place. They envy your endurance, but they also fear it, because it reminds them of their own fragility. That's why they sometimes resent you, mock you, even try to drag you down. It's easier for them to laugh than to admit they're weaker. Easier for them to deny your strength than to face their own collapse. But the fact remains, they couldn't do it. What's be couldn't carry what you've carried. They couldn't hold the line the way you did. And that's why the weight chose you. Not because you wanted it, not because you volunteered, but because it knew everyone else would break under it. The world has a cruel way of testing people, of finding out who's real and who's decoration. And when the test came, others collapsed, but you remained standing. Not unharmed, not unscarred, but standing. That's the difference. That's what makes you the only one who could do this. Because when the weight crushed everyone else into dust, you turned it into the reason you're still here. Fire forges the weapon. Pain forges the chosen. People love to talk about strength, like it's a gift, like it's something you're born with, handed neatly into your palms the day you arrive. But that's not how it works. Strength is not inherited. It's not given. It's beaten into you. It's carved into your skin, burned into your bones, hammered into shape through every failure, every betrayal, every sleepless night, where you wondered if it was even worth going on. That's the fire. That's the forge. And it doesn't create everyone. It destroys most. But the ones it doesn't destroy, those are the ones it chooses. Look at a blade. It starts as nothing more than dull metal, worthless, ordinary. To turn it into a weapon, it has to face the flames. It has to be heated until it glows, until it's almost broken down into nothing. Then it has to be struck again, and again with relentless force, bent, twisted, reshaped, tested, cooled, reheated, beaten some more. Most people don't want that process. They want the shine without the fire. They want the strength without the pain. But you, whether you liked it or not, you were thrown into the flames. You were hammered by life itself, over and over, until your softness was gone and your edge began to show. Pain is not just suffering, it's transformation. It takes what you thought you were and destroys it, so something harder, sharper, more resilient can rise from the ashes. People who run from pain never find out what they could have been. They remain raw metal, untested, soft, fragile. But the chosen ones, the ones who walk through the fire and don't crawl out begging for pity, they become something different. Pain teaches them lessons comfort never could. Pain exposes truths happiness never will. Pain builds endurance where ease only builds weakness. And the irony is, people envy the weapon, but they fear the fire. They look at you and see your edge, your strength, your ability to endure what broke everyone else. They admire it, sometimes even worship it. But they'll never understand it, because they never went through what you did. They want the finished product without the suffering it took to get there. But you can't fake it. You can't skip the fire. That's why you stand apart. Because you didn't escape the pain. You survived it. And let it forge you into something beyond ordinary. Pain has a way of stripping illusions. It takes away the false comfort that the world is fair, that people always keep their promises, that good things come to good people. It replaces all that with brutal clarity. The world doesn't care. People will betray. Promises will break, and life will burn you whether you're ready or not. But in that fire, you stopped expecting fairness. You stopped relying on comfort. You learned to rely on yourself, on the edge that grew sharper each time you were struck. And that's why you're dangerous now. Because nothing can take from you what pain hasn't already stolen. Nothing can break you in ways you haven't already been broken. That's the true mark of the chosen, not the absence of scars, but the presence of them. Every scar on your mind, every burn on your heart, every fracture in your soul, that's proof of the forge. Proof you were chosen to go through it. Proof you came out different. You didn't stay soft. You didn't stay fragile. You didn't let the fire consume you completely. You let it shape you. And now, like a weapon, you're sharper, harder, more capable than the ones who ran from the flames. The fire doesn't stop, of course. Life will keep striking, keep testing, keep hammering. But that's the beauty of it. You don't fear it anymore. Because you know what the fire does. You know it doesn't just destroy, it creates. And when you've already been through hell, what more can it do to you? You're not afraid of the flames anymore, because you've already lived inside them. And that's why you're the only one who could do this. Because while others would melt, you've already proven you can endure the heat and come out sharper every time. Destiny picks resilience over perfection. People think destiny chooses the flawless ones, the golden ones, the perfect smiles, the spotless reputations, the ones who always seem untouchable. But perfection is a lie. It's fragile. It cracks the first time it's tested. It falls apart the second the world decides to push back. No, destiny doesn't waste its time on the flawless. It doesn't crown the ones who've never bled, never stumbled, never been humiliated. It picks the ones who've been broken, dragged through the dirt, humiliated and scarred, and yet they're still standing. Because resilience isn't about never falling. It's about refusing to stay down when you do. Think about it. The ones who've had everything handed to them, who've never known loss, never tasted betrayal, never felt the sting of failure. They're brittle. They're ornaments. They look shiny from a distance, but they can't withstand pressure. The first real storm blows, and they shatter. But resilience, that's built in the storm. That's carved into you by failure after failure, rejection after rejection, pain after pain. Destiny doesn't choose the untouchable, it chooses the scarred. Because the scarred don't just survive the fire, they adapt to it. They don't avoid the storm, they learn to walk in it. Perfection fools people into thinking they're safe. Resilience makes you dangerous because you know safety doesn't exist. You've already lost things. You've already fallen apart, and you've already crawled back. That makes you unpredictable, unstoppable, because nothing the world throws at you is new. Pain, you've felt it. Loss, you've lived it. Betrayal, you've survived it. Others collapse at the first taste of those things, but you've been feeding on them for years. Destiny looks for that. It doesn't want the prettiest. It doesn't want the smartest. It doesn't even want the strongest. It wants the one who can't be broken, no matter how many times they're hit. And resilience isn't glamorous. It doesn't look good on a stage. It doesn't come with applause. It doesn't make you look polished. It's messy. It's ugly. It's the grit in your teeth, the blood on your hands, the sleepless nights where you fought demons no one else could see. But that ugliness is exactly what makes it real. Perfection is a costume. Resilience is bare skin. Resilience is raw truth. And that's why destiny chooses it, because only the raw survive. The world doesn't reward perfection for long. It loves it for a while, yes, because perfection is entertaining. It's beautiful. It's a fantasy people want to believe in. But when the chaos comes, when everything falls apart, perfection gets crushed in seconds. And who's left standing when the smoke clears? Not the perfect ones. Not the untouchable ones. It's the resilient ones. The scarred. The broken who refuse to stay broken. The ones who were beaten to the ground and still clawed their way back up, again and again, until destiny had no choice but to notice. That's what makes you different. You're not perfect. You never were. You've failed. You've stumbled. You've been mocked. You've been underestimated. But every single time you got back up. Every single time you refused to stay down. That persistence, that stubbornness, that refusal to quit when quitting would have been the easy way. That's resilience. And that's why you're here. Because destiny doesn't care about your flaws, your scars, your mistakes. In fact, it demands them. It uses them as proof. Proof that you can endure what others cannot. Proof that when everything goes wrong, you won't run. And people will hate you for it. They'll sneer, they'll whisper, they'll remind you of your imperfections, as if that disqualifies you. But the joke is on them. Your imperfections are exactly what qualified you. Your scars are your credentials. Your pain is your testimony. They don't understand it, because they still cling to the illusion of perfection. But destiny isn't fooled. Destiny knows better. Destiny knows perfection is a glass statue waiting to break, while resilience is a blade forged to cut through anything. And that's why it had to be you. Not because you're flawless, not because you're untouchable, but because you've already proven you can fall apart and rebuild yourself from nothing. Because resilience isn't about winning every time. It's about refusing to stay defeated. And when destiny had to decide who could handle the weight, who could carry the fire, who could stand when everyone else crumbled, it didn't choose the perfect ones. It chose you. Standing when all others fall makes you different. It's not about being the loudest in the room. It's not about flashing strength when eyes are watching. Know the difference shows when the silence comes, when the pressure suffocates, when the ground shakes and everyone around you drops to their knees. That's when the truth of who you are reveals itself. Most people collapse the moment things get ugly. They run, they hide, they beg for rescue. But you don't. You stand there, maybe bleeding, maybe shaking, maybe with nothing left in you but rage and defiance. But still, you stand. And that single act separates you from the masses more than a lifetime of words ever could. People like to talk about courage as if it's some glorious banner they wave, as if it's painted in colors and fire. But real courage doesn't come dressed in glory. Real courage looks like silence when your heart is screaming. Real courage looks like putting one foot forward when everything inside of you is begging to stop. Real courage looks like standing when every part of your body and mind is telling you to fall. That's why it's so rare. That's why it's so feared. Because most people will never taste it. When the storm hits, the crowd scatters. They always do. The same ones who cheer and boast about how strong they are vanish when reality tests them. They'll tell you they had no choice, that the pressure was too much, that no one could have endured what they faced. They'll dress their collapse as wisdom, call it survival. But deep down, they know they fell because they couldn't bear the weight. And the cruelest part, they'll resent you for not falling too. Your standing makes their collapse unbearable. Your endurance shines a light on their weakness, and that light burns. Standing while others fall isn't about arrogance, though they'll say it is. It's not about thinking you're better, though they'll paint you as someone who believes that. It's about refusing to join the herd when the herd is running off a cliff. It's about refusing to let the fear, the weight, the chaos drag you down. You didn't choose to stand to prove something. You stood because you had no other choice. Because falling would have meant losing yourself, and you weren't willing to let that happen. And that's what makes you dangerous in a world built on weakness. They can't predict someone who refuses to bow. They can't control someone who won't break under the same weight that crushes everyone else. You become an anomaly, a threat, a reminder that strength doesn't belong to the loudest or the richest or the prettiest. It belongs to the one who refuses to fall when the world commands it. That difference is terrifying to them. Because if you can stand, what excuse do they have for not doing the same? Every scar you carry, every battle you survived, every moment you chose to keep standing instead of collapsing, it all builds into that difference. People think power is about dominance, about control, but real power is the quiet defiance of not bowing when bowing is the easiest option. Real power is surviving the storm without letting it own you. Real power is being the last one on your feet when the dust settles, not because you wanted to be, but because you couldn't stomach the thought of giving in. And maybe it's lonely, standing when all others fall. Because when the crowd is gone, when the silence wraps around you, there's no applause, no cheers, no comfort. Just you, your scars, and the echoes of everything you endured. But even in that loneliness, even in that isolation, there's something unshakable, a truth carved into your bones, that no matter what comes, no matter how heavy, no matter how brutal, you've already proven you can take it. And while the rest are lying broken, you're still standing. And that makes you something they will never understand.